In my last video, I modeled this propane torch, and I said that I was going to get to texturing it. In order to texture it, I have to UV unwrap it, unless I'm doing this simply in Blender. But I'm going to be doing this in Substance Painter. And so I thought in this video I would talk about how I would UV unwrap this. Because I've been asked that before. And so even if we don't get to the texturing part, I think this is an important thing to have a look at. But just before I do that, I actually want to come in here and hide this, and I want to talk to you about something. For example, if I had a cylinder, I'll just make it 16 vertices, and I've got a top on that. And let's go over to the UV editing now. If I want to UV unwrap this, and Blender has already done something, so let's get rid of that. If I had this, and I want to UV unwrap this, and I press U unwrap, I get something crazy going on here. So we're obviously going to have to do some more work here. And let's say what we're going to do is we're going to add seams. Now you've all heard of how you have to unwrap and sort of lay it flat. So let's see how we could do this. Now, pressing 1 is the front of that cylinder. Pressing Control 1 is the back. So often people will put a seam at the back. I'm going to press 2 for edge selection and select that middle seam. I'm going to go Control E, mark seam. So you can see that line in red, that's a seam. If I now select it all and press U unwrap, I get this. Now that doesn't look too healthy to me. And that's because we've got this section here which is going sort of vertically. And then I have this other section which is going horizontally, and this one here. So if I was to take this, for example, if I was to get rid of these, hide those, and just select it and unwrap, well, I get a nice flat sort of rectangular or square thing, and that's kind of what we're going for when we can. But if I bring those back, again, it doesn't unwrap nicely. If, however, I select this edge and this edge and Control E, mark seam, where it changes its orientation from vertical to horizontal, select that all, U unwrap, I now get this section, which is the main body here, and I get these two pieces, which are the top and the bottom, and that is a decent unwrap. Now, of course, there's more to do. You would probably do, you'd want to pack this, but that's the general idea. Now, let's get rid of those seams, and what if I had something a little bit more complicated? What if I put an edge loop there, Control B, pull E and Alt S, and I push that out, just like that. Select the whole thing, U, unwrap. It's looking pretty weird. Let's actually get rid of that. U, unwrap. I get this mess again. All right, let's look from the back, and let's Shift Alt and click there, and Control E, mark seam. Let's put a seam right there. Let's see how nicely that lays out flat. U, unwrap. Look at that. Once again, I've got some horizontal regions here, and although this is vertical, this part is horizontal, and that is. So let's see what we could do. Let's just mark off these two. Control E, mark seam. Let's try that. Well, we now have the caps, but this is looking a little bit funny. We could straighten that, or we could come in here and say, well, let's mark off where it changes. Let's try all of these and see what happens. U, unwrap. And now I have my caps. I have this region here, which represents one of these. This region, which represents the other one. And I've got these pieces here. This part here is going to be this. And this part here is the rest of the cylinder. So that is a better unwrap based on adding seams. Now, let's just get rid of those for the moment. Let's try Smart UV Project and see what happens. Let's not worry about the island margin. So that breaks it up pretty nicely. We've got the caps, we've got those things. I don't have any seams in here, but all these pieces, although they're nice and flat and straight, they're all broken apart from each other. And if you were ever trying to, like, say, do a decal on, on the flat part of the cylinder, and it was broken like this into separate islands, these are islands, that would be very, very difficult. So that's why we do the seams. So let's get rid of that. let's bring back our model and let's have a look at these pieces and start unwrapping it. Let's just focus on that, slash key to focus on this piece. It's kind of like a cylinder. Let's go in, let's try U, unwrap. All right, well, we get this, which looks like a flower or some kind of mandala or abstract thing, but that's not really going to be ideal for texturing. So let's go Control 1, look from the back, and try to put a seam right down the middle. Just Control R. It's going to go all the way through the middle. Control E and mark seam. So we have that. Let's select it all with A, U, unwrap. And now it looks like some kind of a seashell or something. And that's again because we have some curvature on here. This is not perfectly vertical, then it curves, and then we have this part. So what if we try to come in here and put seams in some of these locations? Now, if you only had one edge, it's not that difficult to figure out where to put a seam. But I have bevels in here, and so some of this is going to be trial and error. So I'm going to show you what I would do. I'm going to put a seam right here, Control E, mark seam. And down at the bottom, I've got a bevel here. Let's try putting a seam right down here where this seam ends, and it's definitely horizontal. Let's just try that and see what it looks like. All right, we've got the bottom piece there. We've got this piece here, which is probably this neck, and we've got this. Now, we can do a little bit better than this. Let's come in here, let's select that and press the period key to focus on that. Let's try putting an edge loop. Let's see, where should we do this? Where should we cut it? We could try the very top one. Let's try that. Let's mark seam. And then what if we get rid of these ones here? Let's go Control E, clear seam, so that it cuts up here and it just cuts there. Let's just try that. All right, so that has broken apart this piece and this piece. And by the way, you can come to this UV sync and you can select a piece. We'll try Control L, and that'll get everything. All right, let's go here. If I do that, you can see, okay, so we're dealing with that piece. And when I stand out, I get that. All right, so that's this part here. What's this piece? Let's try Control L. Okay, that's that inner ring. And that's going to be okay for texturing. I mean, you could try to break this up more, but I don't think it's really necessary. So this is not bad, but this piece would be really nice if this was straight, and if this piece was straight. So generally what I would do is this. I would put my seams down where I think I'm going to want them, and there are a couple of tools that you can use. You can use over here this display stretch. That can help. You want blue colors, if at all possible, and this is looking fine. You can also add a UV grid or a checker grid. I'm not going to do that right now. Let's have a look though at how we can straighten this out. I'm going to press Control Spacebar to maximize this viewport. And what you want to do is you want to look for a polygon that is as square as possible. And you'll often find that towards the middle. So it's not critical which one you choose. I'm going to choose this one here. I'm going to press 2 for edge selection. Select this edge, and I want this to be straight across. In other words, leveled out in the Y. So I'm going to press SY0, and it may or may not have moved. This one, SY0. And then I want these to be vertically lined up. So in the X axis, SX0, and then this one, SX0. So I've straightened this out. It's not a square, it's a rectangle. I'm going to press 3 for face selection, and remember which one I just straightened, this one. I'm going to select it. All right. With that done, I'm going to press Control L to select what's linked to it. So this is the active polygon, and I've select those. I'm going to right click and choose Follow Active Quads. And I now have a straighter UV island. Now, there are softwares that will do this automatically for you, and it might be possible in Blender. I don't know how. And so this is what I do. I just do it manually. It takes a couple minutes. So I'm going to come in here. Maybe I'll choose this one. Press 2, SY0. Now, if that happens, come out of this UV sync and come back in and do that, and then find it again. Maybe it's this one. So we'll go with this one, SY0, SY0, and then these ones, SX0, and this one, SX0. Select that one, Control L, and right click, follow active quads. And you may have to move this, whatever. All right, these ones are going to be okay. So I have unwrapped this. And of course, we still have to do average island scale and pack it. We'll get to that later. Let's go back to the rest of the model, and I'm going to press H to hide it because that's done. Let's come to this object here and just slash key to focus on this. This is a little bit like the cylinder that I was working on before. So let's Control 1. Let's look from the back. Press 2 for edge selection. Shift Alt and click a central one. And mark seam. Let's have a look at just unwrapping it like that. Looks, again, like a seashell. Looks pretty ugly for an unwrap. And again, we have these vertical and these horizontal sections. So let's think about where we could put edge loops. Sometimes what I do is I will either choose the last one where there's a horizontal piece or the middle one. Sometimes I'll go for the middle one. So we could try that. Control E, mark seam. Now, because I've done that, imagine if you're cutting this. You cut down here and you cut around here. I really don't need this part here to be marked as a seam, because that'll just cut open the circle. Trying to get that. Control E, clear seam. All right, let's test that. U, unwrap. So we've broken off this piece here, this bottom piece. The rest of it still doesn't look very good. Well, we have more work to do. So let's work our way up. Why don't we choose maybe the middle of my bevels? Mark seam there. Let's come over here. Let's choose this one because we're transitioning from this relatively flat to this vertical one. Control E, mark seam. Let's do that over here. I usually try to have the same number of edges, like 3 when I bevel. We'll try it here. And it may not work as well there as maybe on this one, but so some of it is trial and error. Mark seam there, over here, mark seam there, and let's come up to this one, and we'll do it on the middle one is there, mark seam. And then we really, let's see what happens here. Well, it does come in. Ideally, what I would probably do here is, let's do this one as well. Control E, mark seam. And then, let's see, do I need that? Let's try getting rid of that and see what happens. And that one. I might have needed that. All right, so we've put a lot of seams in there. Let's select it all, U, unwrap. Okay, so we have some broken circles. That's totally fine. And we have some nice straight pieces. We could turn on this and we could try to see. Let's see if I do Control L. I'll get a little bit of the circle, but you can see that this long piece is basically this. And here, I'll do it on this side. That's this piece. And this is going to be that piece. So these vertical ones are these ones. But they might be a little bent. And then we have a bunch of circles. And that's okay. So let's come in here and see if we can straighten this one out. Just, we probably don't even need to, but I would feel better if we did. So I'm going to press 2 for edge selection. I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to find one that looks like I'll have to do the least amount of work. I'm going to turn that off though. Select, deselect. And I'll go for this one. So let's straighten it out in the Y, SY0. This one, SY0. And in the S, SX0 and SX0. Remember which one you're on. Press 3, face selection, Control L, follow active quads. And we've just move it over. We straighten that one out. So we've unwrapped that piece. Of course, we will see how well this works when we go into Substance Painter. Let's bring everything back and let's take that and hide it. Let's come to this piece. Now, for something as small as this, I might just go U unwrap, and that is probably fine, but we might as well unwrap it as well. So we'll focus on that, and you can see I've got the the bevel here. Now I could grab all of these from the middle, and we might as well go with that theme because we're using the middle. So we'll do that. We'll try this and see how well it works. I'll do that, and I'm just going to choose one edge to come up. All right, so we cut it here and cut the top off. Let's try and see what that looks like. And we get this. Here's our top, and here's this piece, and it is bent a little bit. So let's see if we could straighten this at all. Let's try maybe SY0, SY0, SX0, SX0. Select that polygon, Control L, follow active quads. I'm just going to move it. We'll be scaling this stuff later. It probably didn't matter very much for a piece like this, but why not? Let's hide that. Let's come to this piece here. All right, again, it's a sort of a cylinder. It's just bent. So where to put the seam? Now, the other thing I should have mentioned earlier, you can see this has a lot of polys. That's because over here I had a subdivision surface on this. So before you unwrap, if you have subdivision surface or a bevel, apply those modifiers. I didn't always do that in early videos, and it doesn't always make a big difference, but it's good practice. So where to put the seam? I'm going to put it right on the bottom, the underside of this, which is here. I'm going to go press 2 for edge selection. I'm going to try to get a central one. Control E, mark seam. Let's just focus on that piece alone. Let's select it all and try and unwrap. And we get this, like an esophagus or some kind of a worm or something. All right, well, we're going to try to put some edge loops in here, and let's use the same philosophy. If it sort of changes its orientation, let's put some in. Let's select something and press period key to zoom in. Now, because I had a subdivision surface, I have a heck of a lot of edges in there, probably more than I needed. So I'm just going to try to choose one that is in between the change of direction, if you know what I mean. It's going up here and out. So I'll put it there. Control E, mark seam. I'm going to come to the top here. Maybe I'll choose this one. Control E, mark seam, because it seems like it's like if this was a floor, that's kind of the end of the floor, and then the wall starts. Let's just try unwrapping that and see if we see any change. Well, we do see a change. We get this bent piece and these weird worm-like parts. So let's just work our way up the model here. Maybe this one right on the underside. Control E, mark seam. And we've got this depression in here. I'll grab maybe that one. Control E, mark seam. And somewhere in here, we're going to find the perfect one. Which one? Let's try that one. Again, trial and error, so don't worry. Just do it and bring it into Substance Painter or use it in Blender or whatever you're doing and see how it looks. Now, up here, what to do? There's so many. I'm just going to try to find one that kind of starts the change from vertical to horizontal. Mark seam. We could just try that right there. Mark seam and unwrap. And that actually probably would be good enough. We don't necessarily have to work on this, but if we wanted to just be complete, I could take maybe this one. That's where that level area ends and then it starts descending. I could go Control E, mark seam, and let's try it like that. You unwrap. And that gives that. Now, what's the difference if I get rid of, let's see, this piece ends here. 2, 3, 4. Let's try getting rid of those, clearing those seams, and unwrap. And that's probably going to be just fine anyhow. I do get a circle. I'll put on this, and I want to know where that is. That's all the inner face, and that's going to be just totally fine. So I turn that off. All right, so I think we are going to be okay. So let's straighten these out now. This one's pretty straight, but it's not perfectly, so we might as well do it. It's going to take time, but that's what this is all about. So, you know, these squares are looking nice. Let's try this one. SY0, SY0, SX0, and the same. 3, select, Control L, zoom out a bit, right click, follow active quads, just move it a little bit. All right, nice and straight. So if you had to put text on this or a decal, it would be great. Now these ones are bent, so let's try to find one that we can use. And maybe this one. SY0. All right, select that polygon, Control L, and follow active quads. Another one done. Doesn't take long. All right, what's a good one for this? Maybe this one. SY0, SY0, SX0, SX0. Select that, Control L, and follow active quads. Good. Okay, these ones we're going to leave alone. Let's just do this little guy down here. As if it would even really matter, probably just this lip here. But let's see if we can straighten it. So these are obviously rectangles, they're not squares. Let's try this one though. See if we can get it to work. I really don't think it would make any difference based on what we're gonna do, but just to be complete, we'll try it. I'll active quads, let's move it over there. And then we have these things. So find a rectangle or a square that you like. That looks pretty good, like you wouldn't have to do too much changing. SX0, SX0, select it and Control L and follow active quads. Good. And we got our last one. Well, we got some nice squares in here. I'll just take this one. All right, select it, Control L, and follow active quads. And we got that. We'll hide that. All right, the last piece is this. Now this is an odd piece. Let's go into that. Let's just try unwrap. Again, it looks like that, and that probably is not ideal. Let's try Smart UV project. Yeah, let's just do it like that. And that breaks it up pretty nicely, but again, the pieces are separated out. I mean, depending on what kind of texturing you'd want to do, I probably would try to split this up. And so I will choose an underside edge, maybe that one. I don't really know. Mark seam, we'll do that. Let's try that, see if that does anything. Yeah, it looks pretty messed up. Let's make sure we're saving. Sometimes if it's a really weird unwrap, it'll crash. Let's try to break it where, again, the orientation or the angle changes. Mark seam there. Now, for this part, if I do a seam here, which I often would tend to. By the way, a lot of people would triangulate this right into the middle. And I don't tend to do that very often. But if I do this, you might see a difference in the pattern or the texture between here and here. It might look obvious. So I'm actually going to go back to my middle bevel. And I'm going to get rid of this. Control E, clear seam. And I'm going to do the same here, middle bevel. And here, middle bevel. Now, there's other stuff on the inside, which is not going to be seen, but it gives us an odd unwrap. Now, that I could straighten. This I could straighten. This I don't really like. So why not be complete? Do middle bevel here. And down here, same thing. Middle bevel. And over here, mark seam. And we got one here. I'll go for middle bevel. Again, you might want to choose this one, but I'm just trying to be consistent and do the middle bevels. That's pretty much everywhere I think I would put a seam. Let's try this. All right, so it gives us a bunch of circles, which we can deal with, and a bunch of pieces that can be straightened. All right, I mean, this one's all wobbling and stuff. That's probably not a problem, but we could straighten it. I'm just going to look for a rectangle that looks decent. This one does. And do the typical SY0 and SX0. All right, then I'm going to select that face and Control L and choose follow active quads. And I'm going to repeat that for these other ones as well. Bring everything back, make sure we have saved. If I select everything and I go into edit mode, I have everything all jumbled up. So I'm going to press A, and that will select all my islands. And then in Blender, I'm going to choose UV and average island scale. And what that does is it creates island sizes that are relative to the size of the object in the model. But we're not done yet because they're overlapping, and that will not work. So the next thing to do is go to UV, pack islands, and now they are all packed in, and if you zoom in, there should be the smallest amount of space in between them. All right, we can actually give a bit of a margin, 0.003 maybe. That might even be a bit too much, but that ensures that they do not overlap, and you probably do want to have a bit of a margin. But as you can see, everything is nicely laid out. This piece here is the main body of the cylinder, which is quite big. Now I do have a couple more things I'd like to say about this, and one of them is the old idea that you should have the same size UVs on everything, and I disagree because, for example, the texture that I may want to put on here might be different than the texture I want to put on here, and I might actually need more detail on this. And if you look at this, and if I come over to here and I select that, it's not given very much space in the UV map, certainly not like this cylinder, although the cylinder of course is bigger. But what if I wanted some fine text on this? This is where you end up positioning the UV islands yourself, scaling them to the size you want, or you use the UDIM method where you get multiple UV tiles and you can get much greater resolution. I've done that a number of times in my videos. So you may find that, so for example, this part here, I want a texture on there. And you go, that's a pretty tiny little strip right there. If you want fine grain or you want text on there, even at 2K or 4K, it may not be sufficient. And so that's why I might use the UV tiles, or I might use, manipulate this myself. I might say, well, you know what, I don't need this much space for that thing, so I'm going to scale it down, and this piece here I'm going to take, and I don't remember which one it was exactly, and I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to rotate it, and scale it as much as I can because I want more textile density, I want more resolution on that. All right, so there is one other thing that I want to mention, and then I think we'll leave it at that for this video because we do have it unwrapped. I just made some changes, so I'll fix that. And in the next video, we'll use this unwrapped, and we'll see how well it takes a texture. The other thing I want to mention is having extra faces. Now, I had a tendency early on not to delete faces that were not going to be shown. And just want to mention something, like, for example, down here, wherever this thing ends, I don't know, I think it's there. Let's just imagine I had another face in there. Well, that's another face to be unwrapped. And if you imagine that we're packing a car for a vacation and we're putting all of our luggage in there, and the kids and the dogs and the cats and everything we need, every extra face that doesn't need to be there, I'm going to delete that just so I don't forget. But let's say I came in here, and let's say I had this closed off. Well, that's an extra face that's got to fit there. And let's say on this piece here, I could have had a face that could have been closed off, and that could have been closed off. So by deleting extra faces, you give more room. I'm going to average island scale again and pack. Oh, I'm using UV Pack Master there. I just pressed N. It's just a paid software that packs it very nicely, a little bit more efficiently than Blender. So, you want to delete the extra faces. Now, I do have a face at the bottom I could delete, but I might have this on its side or something, so I might need that. One more thing I want to show you, which is about the size again. I'm looking at this, is this bolt here. All right. And this face, you know, it's very, very small. And chances are, you know, you're not going to need any more textile density or resolution. But if you did do a render from here, you want to focus on, you know, this part and that, well, this little piece here is tiny in there, and I don't think it's going to give you enough. Now you could easily move it and increase the size here. You know, that may not be much of a change, but you could do, although UV Packmaster is pretty good at packing this, you need to think about those things as well. So whether you're just average on scale and packing it, or whether you're taking everything and moving it out, and then, you know, scaling it to the size and moving them back in, I often do that as well. So anyways, we have unwrapped this, and you can see the UV maps for this here. So in the next video, we'll use this and texture the actual torch.